Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time. And the most important and interesting updates are coming from the South Donetsk direction. This night the Russians managed to implement a very interesting and special operation against the Ukrainian forces in the vicinity of Urozhaine and Staromayorskoye. Somewhere at night, yesterday in the evening, to be more precise, the Russians launched their offensive operation from Staromlynovka and Kremenchuk in direction of Urozhaine. They were trying to establish control over the three lines that located in front of the city. And some sources are saying that as a result of that attack, the Russians managed to enter these three lines and to capture them, and basically to restore their control over this territory. But the most important, the most interesting thing is that the Ukrainians, of course, tried to repel the Russian attack, and they managed to accumulate and concentrate some forces. They managed to bring some reserves in this area, and of course, the Ukrainians tried to keep their main reserves in Velyka Novosilka, and they sent the reserves. The reserves managed to cross Mokry Yala River, and they were trying to repel attack, but at some point something went wrong, and basically the entire Ukrainian garrison of the city was destroyed and completely reduced till zero. What did happen and how did it happen? First of all, to understand that special operation that the Russians tried to implement the previous night, we need to understand that during the previous days, the Russians destroyed at least two bridges in the vicinity of Velyka Novosilka. On the 30th of September, the first bridge was destroyed between Velyka Novosilka and the road that goes and leads to Urozhaine as a result of missile strike. Then a few days later, the second bridge was destroyed that connects Velyka Novosilka and Staromayorskoye, let's call it like this, another road. So basically, the Ukrainian logistic was completely collapsed in this area, and of course the Ukrainians didn't have much time to fix the issue and to find a solution how to support their forces in this artillery back in the fields between Urozhaine and Novodonetsk. So now let's discuss this one more time. At some point, the Russians launched an offensive operation in direction of Urozhaine from the fields between Staromlynovka and Kremenchuk. That was like a very powerful tank attack, and the main purpose of that attack was to create an ambush and not to enter Urozhaine and not to capture three lines. The most important goal was to show Russian possibilities and to force the Ukrainians to call, of course, reinforcement. Obviously, when talking about Urozhaine, there are some Ukrainian forces, but this is a very small garrison. The main purpose of this garrison is just to hold the Russians, to attack them with anti-tank weapons, and to call for the reinforcement. But the problem is that the bridges in the vicinity of Velyka Novosilka, those bridges that, those roads, main roads that Ukrainians used to use for supporting their forces were destroyed. So basically the Ukrainians couldn't use this road, and the Ukrainians couldn't use this road for supporting the forces because those bridges were destroyed a few days ago. For these purposes, the Ukrainians called some reinforcements that came from very long distance, probably maybe from Rovnopol, maybe from Novosilka, maybe from Vilnopole. Anyway, those reserves were discovered and tracked by the Russians until all the way from the first position to Staromayorskoye. When the Ukrainians got Staromayorskoye, this is the only area where the Ukrainians have probably a bridge or some pontoon bridges that they can use to cross. They crossed with their forces this area, entered the western part of Urozhaine, and that was exactly what the Russians wanted. At this time, the Russians launched significant number of attacks with different types of weapon, including TOS flamethrower systems, including artillery rounds, and many other different type of heavy weapon. And as a result of that strike, significant number of Ukrainian armored forces were destroyed in this area. And that was something like an ambush that the Russians tried to implement. Now we need to wait for the next Russian move, what they're going to do next, because obviously the Ukrainians will have some reserves to send, and they will move them here in this direction one more time. But anyway, until the Ukrainians solve the issue with logistics, they're gonna have such traps and ambushes almost every single day from the Russian side. When talking about, let's say, eastern flank of South Donetsk direction, about Novomykhailivka, Marinka, Krasnogorovka, the Russians continued their offensive and storming operation of the city. Today, this night, there were another few explosions in the city of Novomykhailivka. The Russians were using FAB 500 bombs, and also the Russians managed to discover the Ukrainian local ammo depot on the road between a stronghold by the name of Zverinets and Novomykhailivka. And as a result of artillery strike, probably with Krasnopol, that, according to the author of this video, ammo depot was destroyed. So we see that there are still some infrastructure facilities, military facilities that Ukrainians can use to support their forces, and currently there are still a lot of job to do for the Russians until they're able to move to the next phase of attack for ground operation in the direction of Novomykhailivka. Another interesting update we got from the area of Krasnogorovka. Today the Russians published the video how, using FPV drones, they discovered the Ukrainian positions along the road between Krasnogorovka and Marinka, and with FPV drones the Russians were attacking and bombing the Ukrainian strongholds. This video is important because of geolocations and correction of the combat line. So according to this video, this tree line is under complete Ukrainian control. So that's why I have updated the map, at least this territory currently in the gray zone. Now we are moving to Orekhov area, to the Bradley Square. Today we haven't received almost nothing from this direction. The only important thing that we need to mention is that Ukrainians currently try to concentrate some forces a little bit to the north from Verbova, somewhere in the fields between Novopokrovka and Verbova, and with the purpose to attack further deep inside of the territory of Russian controlled territory in this direction, to maintain a little bit the foothold, to get more tree lines, and probably even to establish half encirclement of Novopokrovka. The Russians, of course, tracked the entire situation. They saw everything, and during the night and during the previous evening and day, they made significant number of artillery strikes against the Ukrainian positions, against the Ukrainian forces. For some reason, for another reason, we can say that maybe the Russians are planning to attack in this direction, but it's like highly unlikely the Russians are going to do this. When talking about the rare positions, near rare positions of the Ukrainian forces, the Russians during the previous night managed to discover and to destroy the Ukrainian striker somewhere behind, very far behind Orekhov, using Lancet drone. So we see a lot of vehicles in this area that Ukrainians were trying to hide among the tree lines and brushes, but the Russians discovered them. Maybe the Ukrainians tried to concentrate their forces before the next wave of attack. And a little bit further in the vicinity of Vilnyanka, the Russians managed to discover the Ukrainian raider, and as a result of another Lancet strike, another Ukrainian equipment was destroyed. Very important and very, let's say, important equipment, yes. Now we are moving further to Bakhmut-Artyomovsk direction. Today we got also a lot of updates from this territory. The Ukrainians activated in this area. Today the Ukrainian side published significant number of videos of counter-artillery duels, and as a result of those duels, the Russians lost up to 4 artillery systems like Gets and S in this direction, few armored vehicles. So there was something interesting. We see that and the most important from this video is the current Ukrainian focus. We see that the Ukrainians tried to attack and suppress the territory that located behind the railways that located between Bakhmut, Artyomovsk and Klishchiivka. And this is the artillery systems that the Russians were using for supporting Russian forces in the railways. And we understand that the Ukrainians probably managed to suppress some artillery forces of Russian Federation. And the next step, of course, is to make another attempt to cross the railways and to establish control over the Russian side of the railways between Klishchiivka and Bakhmut. So this is something like the first part of upcoming another Ukrainian attempt to attack in this direction. But I'll remind you that at least the forces of 93rd Mechanized Brigade has already lost its combat capabilities and was removed, or currently is in the process of removing from the front line. It's very difficult to understand what kind of forces the Ukrainians are planning to use for upcoming offensive operation. Today the Russians also published the video of missile strikes against Alexeyeva-Drushkovka. On this video we can see the usage of Iskander strikes. There were at least 2 strikes. We discussed this attack a few days ago. This attack took place not this night, we just got the video this night, but this attack took place around 2 days ago, and as a result of that attack, another ammo depot and barrack of Ukrainian forces were destroyed, probably with the concentration of armored vehicles, maybe with some munition for the Ukrainian forces. When talking about Kupiansk-Liman, there were no changes on the ground, nothing special during the night, and the same story about Kherson direction. Nothing special during the previous night, just another usage of FAB strikes against the city by the name of Vysely near to Berislav. And as we discussed, the Russians are trying to destroy and attack the Ukrainian concentration of forces and not to allow them to cross Dnipro River and to establish the foothold on the Russian side of this river. And that's it for this short video. Military Summary channel reminds you, we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.